There are agreements with the Taliban that are not previously aware of, and because of your Air Force was extremely cautious in attacking them. What? So So Reuters broke the story of a leaked transcript between President Joe Biden and Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani. They spoke on the phone July 23rd, and in that phone call, Joe Biden tells him to essentially lie about how the war effort is going. So he says in the transcript, quote, "Whether it's true or not, there is a need to project a different picture." So he's saying whether it's true or not, get out in front of this and make it look like the Taliban aren't as strong as they actually are. So the actual transcript, I'm just going to read a bit of this to you. Says, Joe Biden gets on the phone, and then President Ghani says, "Of course, Mr. President, such a pleasure to hear your voice." And Biden says, "I'm a moment late, but I mean it sincerely. Hey, look, I want to make it clear that I'm not a military man any more than you are, but I've been meeting with our Pentagon folks and our national security people, as you have with ours and yours, and as you know, and I need not tell you, the perception around the world and in parts of Afghanistan, I believe, is that things aren't going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban." So things aren't going well. He say, there's a perception around the world. Maybe it wasn't a perception, Joe Biden. Maybe it was reality. And we were all recognizing reality that if you'd spent 20 years as the most powerful military in the world and you were unable to defeat the Taliban at this point, the war's probably not going as well as you'd like. So I would imagine, right? So then he says, I believe that that things aren't going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban, the perception around the world. And he says, and there's a need, whether it's true or not, there's a need to project a different picture. Whether it's true or not, there's a need to project a different picture. He goes on to then say, if you empower the defense minister and execute a strategy focused on key parts of the population centers, and I'm not a military guy, so I'm not telling you what that plan should precisely look like, you're going to get not only more help, but you're going to get a perception that is going to change in terms of how our allies and folks here in the United States and other places think you're doing. So he basically is saying to the president right there, you don't seem to have much of a military strategy and you need to get one. Because if you get a military strategy, then it's going to change what the perception is. So clearly the Pentagon, so right there, this is how we know that there was a serious mess up when it comes to the evacuation, or even lack of evacuation, I should say, for the civilians and the high-risk Afghans. When Joe Biden is on this phone call July 23rd, and he's basically saying to the president, you don't seem to have a plan, and we would support you more, and we'd be able to give you more if it looked like you had a plan. And the Taliban is, we need to give up the perception that they're not doing as well as they actually are. So they knew that this wasn't going to work out. They knew that the Afghan forces were going to fall because they didn't even have a plan. They knew this. So if they knew that they didn't have a plan by July 23rd, then why would they evacuate the military without getting the civilians and the high-risk Afghans out first? That is my big beef with this. This is not a warmongering posture of, we should stay forever and ever. There's a lot of criticism there that it seems to be this. You can either accept and praise Joe Biden and say, wow, he's the first president with courage to end a war. And isn't this fantastic? You can either carry for Patriot Act writing, warmongering Joe Biden, or you are a warmonger yourself who wants to stay in endless war in Afghanistan. That's the narrative that we're being pushed by certain sectors of the Democratic Party, and that's not true. There is a third space to be landing in, and that is we wanted out of that war. Now was the time to get out of that war. We didn't need to extend the war a single day longer. But what we should have done in advance, because Joe Biden, remember, pushed that date. He pushed it from May 1st to September 11th or August 31st. And if you push it those months, the reason we thought he was pushing the date was because we believed he needed more time to get the equipment out and to get the people out. That's what we were thinking. We weren't thinking it was, what were they doing otherwise? What were they doing? Why not just leave May 1st? What was the difference? If you were just going to leave in the middle of the night, abandon Bagram Airfield, leave the civilians and the Afghans behind, then why not? Why didn't we leave May 1st? I don't understand what the problem was. Why extend it? So in this transcript, we're finding out that Joe Biden and the Pentagon knew that the Afghan forces, that the president, the government of Afghanistan had no plan. And he says, if you get a plan, then, we can help you out a little bit more. He says, he goes on to say here, I really think, I don't know whether you're aware just how much the perception around the world is that this is looking like a losing proposition, which it is not. Not that it necessarily is that. So there's Joe Biden doing the fumbling around, right? He says, which is not, well, not that it necessarily is that. But so the conclusion I'm asking you to consider is to bring together everyone from, he's saying your former vice president, your former president, and everybody in between. If they stand there and say that they back the strategy you put together and that you put a warrior in charge, a military man, and he's referring to their defense minister in charge of executing that strategy, that will change perception and that will change an awful lot, I think. So he's been instructed clearly by the Pentagon to tell the president of Afghanistan to get it together. He says, get it together, get a military strategy together. You've got to do it. They knew he didn't have one. If they knew he didn't have one, why didn't they get the civilians and the Afghans out? So then Ghani says, Mr. President, we are facing a full-scale invasion composed of Taliban, full Pakistani planning and logistical support, and at least 10 to 15,000 international terrorists, predominantly Pakistanis, thrown into this. So that dimension needs to be taken account of. I am going to do an entire segment at some point on Pakistan and Pakistan's role in all of this, because I don't think I've heard a whisper about Pakistan, but all of my sources inside of Afghanistan are saying Pakistan did this, that this was all supported by Pakistan, that Pakistan is to blame. That is what everybody in Afghanistan is saying. Well, at least the sources I'm hearing from are all pointing the finger squarely at Pakistan and saying that the United States should sanction Pakistan, that the United States should be going after Pakistan on this. But I haven't heard much on that. Maybe you have. If you have, email me. Let me know if you're hearing this in the mainstream news. Maybe I'm not watching it enough. Kim@KimIverson.com for sure. Let me know. He goes on to say, second, what is crucial is close air support. And if I could make a request, you have been very generous if your assistance, particularly to our Air Force, to be front-loaded, because what we need at this moment, there was a very heavily reliance on air power, and we have prioritized that. If it could all be front-loaded, we would greatly appreciate it. So he's asking for more air support, okay? And he says, and third, regarding procedure for the rest of the assistance, for instance, military pay has not increased for over a decade. So he's asking for raises for all of his military, saying, maybe if you gave us raises, then there would be more morale. Maybe people would start to feel like, oh, okay, they still believe in us, and so we're going to fight. The problem with that is, and I think the Afghan president was quite smart in asking for a pay raise, was because we now know, with the collapse of Afghanistan to the Taliban, that this was just a jobs program for a lot of these people. They didn't have an ideology. They didn't know what they were really fighting for. They were fighting alongside, occupying Americans against their own Taliban Afghanis. I mean, they were sitting there like, I don't know, this is a job. It gives me money, food on the table. It's a job. It's a secure job. So him asking for raises was pretty smart, right? To say, well, it's a jobs program, so let's give them raises. And he says and he goes on to say, and this is really important, he says, we need to make some gestures to rally everybody together. So if you could assign the National Security Advisor or the Pentagon, anyone you wish to work with us on the details, talking about the pay raise. So our expectations, particularly regarding your close air support. So he says, we want to work out the details of your air support and some pay raises. And he says, there are agreements with the Taliban that we or you, so it's unclear in the transcript whether he says we or you. So there are agreements with the Taliban that are not previously aware of, and because of your Air Force was extremely cautious in attacking them. What? So he's saying the Air Force was cautious in attacking the Taliban. So why would that be? Why would the Air Force not want to attack the Taliban? Well, this kind of goes to a suspicion that I think many of us have had, which is I'm starting to think there was a deal done with the Taliban that we were not made aware of, that they did not want to disclose to the American people. And it's because they knew the optics of that would not go over well because so many Americans are against diplomacy and against those, look, we've been fighting a war with against the Taliban for 20 years. So to suddenly say, okay, we're waving the white flag, we're doing a deal with them, we're leaving, we're basically doing a peaceful transfer of power for the most part. Because remember, we didn't have any run-ins with the Taliban on the exit. And that, as time went on, and we saw that there was really nothing coming from, no resistance from the Taliban. They were letting Americans through the gates. They were even letting Afghans through the gates who had visas and green cards. They were letting them, there were some reports, of course, of them not. But by and large, they certainly were allowing all Americans that we know of. I mean, again, there are reports kind of in the outskirts away from Kabul that there's some Taliban that maybe are not allowing Americans through. But by and large, they were cooperating. And that cooperation mixed with now this transcript of him saying there were agreements with the Taliban that we were not made aware of, and because of that, your Air Force was extremely cautious in attacking them, leads me to believe, and now especially, we hadn't even, it wasn't even wheels up from Kabul before you had the administration and even the international community talking about recognizing the Taliban as an official government, so as long as they meet certain parameters, and which I'm all in favor of. I think, look, we have to. They're obviously the government of Afghanistan now, and there's no point in denying that, and there's no point in forcing the Afghan people to suffer anymore. So the best thing we can do is help them build their nation. We don't have to agree with their government. We don't have to agree with the lifestyle that the government imposes on the people. But the best way to help the people move forward, the best way to give them freedoms is to give them economic prosperity. When they have economic prosperity, they'll have a lot of jobs. So what does that mean? When they have a lot of jobs, that means that the men can't handle all the jobs on their own. Women are going to have to work. So automatically right there, it brings progress, a type of lifestyle that we here in America think is the best, equality. It brings that in. You'll have children that will be well fed. They'll then need to, they'll be surviving. They won't be dying of malnutrition and diseases, and they'll need to have something to do. So they'll go to school. And as they go to school and they learn and their minds are expanded, they'll want to get those jobs. And so it's this cycle that happens that as a group prospers economically, they tend to make progress on the social front as well. So I believe it's extremely important that we recognize the government and help them build their nation. We don't have to give them a bunch of money. We don't have to, we don't have to do anything like that. I'm not saying nation build Afghanistan by any means, but I am saying we need to not be in their way. We need to not block it. We need to stop withholding their funds, holding their money ransom, that sort of stuff, blocking the international community from helping them out. But the fact that the international community was so quick to say, well, we'll recognize you if, and the fact that our government was unwilling to say, well, no, they're the enemy and they weren't demonizing them, makes me believe that there was a deal done that we're not aware of. All of that together, not attacking them with the Air Force, leaving and kind of saying, well, I think everybody's going to be fine because once the Taliban are in control, they're still going to want to operate in a commercial airport. People will still be able to fly in and out. It'll be fine. And the fact that they were so quick to start recognizing them or even entertaining the idea of recognizing them on the international stage, that to me makes me believe that there was a deal done. Biden says at the end of this call, he says, well, look, thank you. Look, close air support works only if there is a military strategy on the ground to support. So they knew. Biden knew. The Pentagon knew. There was no Afghan forces strategy. They had no idea what they were going to do. There was no strategy. The administration was only willing to give them air support if they had a strategy, which they did not have. So how could they not have anticipated that Afghanistan would fall to the Taliban within days? How could they not have anticipated that if they knew, according to this transcript, that there was no strategy? There was no ground strategy to fight the Taliban. So this just goes to reiterate what I said 2 weeks ago, and why I'm so upset with Biden, the administration, why I believe Biden why he should resign. Now, I don't think this is an impeachable offense. I don't know if he broke the law, but I do think he should resign, and because this is shameful. It's shameful to leave people in Afghanistan, civilians, when the military just up and leaves in the middle of the night. It's shameful to do that. And it's shameful to leave those people there, leading them to believe that, oh, don't worry about it. You've got months and months before the Taliban, if the Taliban even ever takes over the place, you have time. That was a lie. That was a face-saving lie. And these politicians and these top brass and the State Department and the intel community, they decided to save face. They didn't want to admit how poorly this war had actually gone. They didn't want to admit that when we left, our 20-year effort of trying to build up a government, a paper tiger, government in Afghanistan was an absolute failure, and that within days the Taliban would be taking over the place. And they also probably didn't want to admit that, well, we already know the Taliban are taking over the place because we made a deal with them. They didn't want to admit any of this. And because they didn't admit any of this, they left people scrambling for their lives. And even if it wasn't an actual fear, even if Americans are safe with Taliban, it's how do you know that? And how can you guarantee that? I mean, it is insanely frightening. And then you had all of these, I personally think, this is pure speculation, but I think that part of the deal they made with the Taliban was that they were not going to be evacuating very many Afghans. I think that was probably the deal. They didn't want a brain drain. The Taliban says, look, we want a country, we want to build, we want to be able to have good infrastructure and smart people around, and so we can't have a brain drain. You can't take them with you. You can take the Americans. You can take the ones that have green cards because they've already built families back home in America. Fine, but you can't take the rest. I think they made that deal with, again, speculating, totally speculating, but that's what it feels like to me. And yeah, the Taliban are definitely coming after certain people in that group that they're wanting to punish, but I don't think they're going to be punishing all of them by any means. They might want to put them in re-education camps. Who knows what they're planning on doing, but I really think that I think there was a deal done that we're not aware of, and I think this phone call is extremely damning. I do think Biden should have to resign. It doesn't leave us in a very good spot. Kamala Harris is not any better, but I do think politicians, not only should Biden resign, by the way, he should be taking about 10 or 15 people with him in that. We should be looking at a slew of resignations from the top brass at the Pentagon, the top officials at the CIA, the top people at the State Department. Tony Blinken needs to go with them. All of them need to go, including Biden. These people lied to us. And they lied, more importantly, to the Afghan people that were helping the U.S. for 20 years. They lied to the Americans that are over in Afghanistan. They lied to our allies in Europe. They lied. They lied. And in doing that, they left us with a scramble at the end, and still people left behind. So this was damning, totally damning. No, I will not buy into this ridiculous idea that you either have to say Joe Biden is a wonderful, courageous, like he suddenly somehow became a dove, like as if Joe Biden morphed one day overnight into somebody who was going to be like the anti-war advocate, Joe Biden. Are you kidding me? He wrote the Patriot Act. He's been a warmonger his entire career in the Senate. He has not changed. So to naively believe that, well, he got us out of war, he's ending wars. Oh, give me a break. You really honestly believe that? If you believe that, then I got a lot, what's the phrase? I've got all kinds of things I could sell you in Alaska or something. Like a beachfront resort in Alaska I want to sell you. This type of ridiculous thinking that, oh, Joe Biden is suddenly this progressive leader that is taking the reins of the anti-war movement. He's going to shut down the wars. He's going to bring back home the troops. Give me a break. Okay, he's even said that they're moving to an over-the-horizon strategy in the Middle East. I don't believe that the U.S. will ever declare war again unless we absolutely have to. Like there's an absolute invasion of our territory in some way. I don't see the United States declaring war ever again with any country. And I say that because we don't need to anymore. What they've moved to, the strategies that they've moved to, these over the horizon counterterrorism style strategies don't require a declaration of war. They don't need to do that with the advancements of technology. I mean, back in the day, you had to actually draft people to go boots on the ground and fight a war for you. They don't have to do that anymore. They have drone warfare. They have high-tech warfare. I mean, they don't need humans. And because of that, they don't think they need to ever declare war. So ending wars is not really, I mean, we do need to end wars. We do need to bring troops home. But that doesn't make one a courageous leader who fought back against the military-industrial complex. I mean, give me a break. I cannot believe the sentiments that I'm reading from people who are typically very traditionally side by side with myself on fighting against all of these ridiculous wars, wasteful wars. You know, our foreign policy in this country has been dismal, and all of these people that have been aware of that have spoken out against that. Suddenly now, Joe Biden's great. Joe Biden's courageous. Joe Biden, you know, look at the war machine going against it because they're criticizing the fact that he left Americans behind enemy lines. Oh, gee, like that's, you know, they're acting like, oh, how, well, of course, you know, that's what we have to do if we want to end wars. Well, if you're going to end a war, do it the right way so that people don't criticize you leaving it. Don't leave the civilians behind. Don't leave the high-risk Afghans behind. And then, you know, in a phone call, don't leave evidence, right? Don't leave a trail of evidence showing that you knew from the beginning it was a no-go. That you knew the Taliban were coming. You probably even made a deal with them. And what do you know? You still left allies and Americans behind enemy lines. It's not good. And yeah, I know I do think Joe Biden should resign. I know that leaves us with Kamala Harris, although I think she should go with him. And I know that leaves us with Nancy Pelosi. I don't know what to tell you. Not for long. At least it wouldn't leave us with them for long. I don't think they'd win a re-election in 2024. So, but I do think people should be held accountable. And this is a real stain on our nation. And even Donald Trump didn't do anything this bad in his 4 years. You know, everybody was screaming, saying, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be awful, and he's going to turn and he's going to side with our enemies. And I'm pretty sure Joe Biden and his administration did just that. If you'd like to see more of my content, especially the uncensored kind, sign up for my Locals community. Locals is where we can freely discuss topics that are often censored or limited by big tech. Not only will you get bonus segments not seen on YouTube, but you'll also gain access to my casual behind-the-scenes live streams, informative postings stacked with valuable information, and even just random fun pics and videos from my personal life. It's a way to support my show while getting more content. It's $5 a month for premium access and free for others. So go to my Locals page at kimiverson.locals.com.